The detective's hand froze on the manila folder. I watched his face go pale under the fluorescent lights of the interrogation room at 3 in the morning, and I knew, absolutely knew, that whatever was inside that file was about to change everything. Ashley had been recording the whole thing on her phone. My girlfriend, standing outside the glass partition, camera shaking because her hands were shaking, capturing every second of what she thought was going to be my wrongful arrest. She had no idea what was about to happen, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back about 6 months to when my life actually made sense. My name is Brandon Hayes. I'm 34 years old. I work in commercial real estate development, and until that night, I had what I thought was a pretty solid life. Nothing flashy, no yacht or Tesla, but I had a 4-bedroom colonial in the Riverside neighborhood of Portland, Oregon, paid down to about 60% equity, a job that paid $125,000 a year, and a woman I loved who actually seemed to love me back. Ashley moved in with me in March. We'd been dating for 2 years before that, and honestly, I was ready. I dated around in my 20s, had a couple of serious things that didn't work out, and by the time I hit 30, I'd made peace with the idea that maybe I wasn't the settling down type. But then Ashley came along, and it was different. She was different. She's a documentary filmmaker, not famous or anything. She does independent work, mostly environmental pieces and local interest stories. She makes maybe $40,000 a year, which isn't much, but she doesn't care about money the way I do. She cares about truth, about telling stories that matter. I remember the first time I realized I was in love with her. She was showing me footage she'd shot of salmon runs in the Columbia River, and she was so animated, so alive talking about it, that I just looked at her and thought, yeah, this one. My best friend Mike said I was making a mistake moving her in so fast. We were having beers on my back patio one Saturday in early March, and he was giving me the usual speech about not mixing your personal and professional life too much, about maintaining independence, all that stuff he'd read in some dating advice book. "You're overthinking it," I told him. "She's great." "You know she's great." "She is great," Mike said, swirling his beer. "But great doesn't mean it's going to work. My ex was great too, and look where that ended up." Mike's divorce had been messy. Not abusive or anything, just two people who'd wanted different things and waited too long to admit it. He'd been burned, and now he was the voice of caution in my ear. I appreciated it, even when I didn't want to listen to it. Ashley's stuff started arriving in boxes the second week of March. She didn't have much. She'd been renting a small place in northeast Portland, and she was happy to leave it. When I asked her if she was sure about moving in with me, if it was too fast, she just kissed me and said, "Brandon, I've known you for 2 years. This isn't fast. This is exactly right." The house felt different with her in it. Better. She had this energy that filled the empty spaces. She set up her editing equipment in the spare bedroom upstairs, hung photographs on the walls, filled the kitchen with weird organic groceries that actually made the place smell better. She'd leave little notes for me sometimes. "Your coffee is in the thermos. I love you." And I'd find them in my car before work. My mom came over for dinner that first month. She was skeptical about the whole thing. My mom is from a different generation, and she thought living together before marriage was reckless. But one evening, watching Ashley and me together, something shifted. At the end of the night, as I was walking her to her car, she put her hand on my arm and said, "She's good for you. I can see it." That was everything to me. Work was solid. I was doing commercial development for a mid-sized firm called Halstead Properties. We were working on a mixed-use development project in the Pearl District, about $30 million. It was the biggest project I'd been lead on, and I was hungry for it. My boss, Richard Halstead, had been in the business for 35 years, and he was grooming me for a senior partnership position. We talked about it in vague terms during performance reviews, but the trajectory was clear. Another 2, maybe 3 years, and I'd be partner. The money from that would change everything, not just for me, for Ashley and me. We talked about buying a bigger place, something with more land, maybe outside the city. She wanted a space where she could set up a proper production studio. I wanted a place where we could actually see the stars. That was the dream we were building toward. Everything was moving in the right direction. Then came the phone call on a Tuesday afternoon in late August. I was at the site, going over some structural permits with the contractor, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me. "Mr. Hayes? This is Detective Morrison with the Portland Police Bureau. I need to ask you some questions about a financial matter. Can you come down to the station tomorrow morning?" My first thought wasn't fear. It was confusion. I said yes, agreed to come by at 9 a.m., and hung up. I stood there for a solid 30 seconds, trying to figure out what that was about. Financial matter. What financial matter? I paid my taxes. My mortgage was current. I had decent credit. I couldn't think of a single reason why Portland PD would be calling me. I didn't tell Ashley until that night. I was going to, but she was in the middle of editing a project with a tight deadline, and I didn't want to worry her over what was probably nothing. Some mix-up. Maybe someone had used my name or something. It happened. The station the next morning was exactly what you'd expect. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of bad coffee and old carpet. Detective Morrison was a woman in her 50s, salt and pepper hair, tired eyes. She had a file in front of her, but she didn't open it right away. "This is just routine," she said. "We're looking into some irregularities at Halstead Properties, and your name came up. Do you know anything about missing funds from the commercial development account?" Missing funds. I felt something shift in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "No, absolutely not. What kind of missing funds?" "About $2.3 million, she said casually, like she was telling me the time. I stared at her. "I don't know anything about that." We talked for an hour. She asked me about the Pearl District project, about my access to accounts, about my relationship with Richard Halstead. I answered everything honestly. I had access to the development account. That was part of my job, but there were checks and balances. Richard had to sign off on any major transfers. There were accounting people, finance people, audits. I explained all of it. By the end, Morrison seemed satisfied. She said it was probably nothing, probably just a bookkeeping error, and they'd be in touch if they needed anything else. I left feeling rattled, but relieved. When I got back to the office, Richard called me into his office. He looked pale. "Did they talk to you?" he asked. "Yeah, about missing money from the Pearl District account." "It's not missing," Richard said. There's been a misunderstanding, with some transfers. It'll get sorted out, don't worry about it." But he looked worried, very worried. That night, I told Ashley about it. I expected her to be concerned, but she was surprisingly calm. "It's obviously a mistake," she said. "You have nothing to do with any missing money. They'll figure it out." "That's what I thought," I said, but Richard seemed weird about it. "Richard's always weird," she said, and she kissed the top of my head. "Don't let it stress you out." I tried not to, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was starting to unravel, and that feeling only got worse when, 3 days later, the FBI showed up at my office with a warrant. The FBI agents didn't look like I expected them to look. I'd watched enough crime shows to imagine dark suits and aviator sunglasses. But these two were just regular people, a guy in his 40s with thinning hair and a woman in her 50s wearing reading glasses on a lanyard. They walked into the Halstead Properties conference room like they owned it, and suddenly my entire world tilted sideways. "Brandon Hayes?" the man asked, though he already knew the answer. "That's me." He handed me a piece of paper. Warrant. I read the words, but they didn't make sense. Financial fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. My hands went cold. "We need you to come with us," the woman said, not unkindly, like she was asking me to help her move a couch. Richard was nowhere to be found. His office was empty. I later found out he'd already been arrested at his home that morning at 6 a.m. with his wife watching in her bathrobe. The FBI had been investigating Halstead Properties for 8 months. 8 months, and nobody told me a thing. The drive to the Federal Building downtown felt like it took 6 hours, but it was probably 20 minutes. I kept thinking about Ashley, about how I was supposed to pick up groceries on the way home, about how I'd promised to help her film some B-roll for a project she was working on. They put me in an interrogation room. Not a nice one. Metal table, metal chairs, a recording device in the corner. A lawyer was appointed to me, a public defender named Gerald Chen, who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. He was young, maybe 30, with the exhausted eyes of someone drowning in cases. "Don't say anything without me," he said. "Not a word. Even if they tell you it'll help you if you cooperate. You cooperate by staying silent." The agents came back with files. So many files. And they knew everything. They knew about the Pearl District Development account. They knew about transfers that had been made to shell companies. They knew about bank accounts in Nevada and Wyoming that I'd never heard of. They kept sliding papers across the table with my signature on them. "This isn't my signature," I said, pointing at one. "Your name is on the account," the male agent, Morrison, his tag said, no relation to the detective I'd met before, said flatly. "I didn't open any account. I've never even been to Wyoming." "Someone opened it using your name and your social security number," Morrison said. "Can you explain that?" I couldn't. I looked at Gerald. He shook his head at me. We sat in silence for 3 hours. They asked me questions. I didn't answer them. The agents got frustrated. One of them left the room and came back with coffee that tasted like it had been brewed in 1987. I didn't drink it. By the time they released me on my own recognizance, pending a hearing, pending charges being officially filed, it was almost midnight. They told me not to leave the state. They told me to expect a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They told me a lot of things that sounded like the end of my life. Gerald walked me out to the parking garage. "Get a real lawyer," he said, "criminal defense attorney, someone who specializes in white-collar crime. I can give you some names. This is going to be expensive, but you need someone good." "I didn't do anything," I said. "Doesn't matter," he said, and he actually looked sorry. "Someone did, and they put your name on it. We've got to prove it wasn't you." I drove home in a daze. It was 1 a.m. when I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark except for the porch light. I sat in the car for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. Ashley was asleep on the couch, her laptop still open beside her. She woke up as soon as I came through the door. "Oh my God, Brandon, where have you been? You didn't answer your phone. I've been trying to call you for hours. I was about to call the police. I was so worried." She stopped. She looked at my face. "What happened?" I told her. All of it. The FBI, the warrant, the fake accounts, the allegations. She listened without interrupting, her face getting paler and paler. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. "That's impossible," she finally said. "You would never do anything like that. They have to know that. They don't care what I would or wouldn't do. They care about what they can prove." "Then we'll prove it. We'll get you a lawyer, a good lawyer. We have savings, we can't afford what this is going to cost," I said. I was sitting on the floor now, my back against the wall. Criminal defense attorneys for federal cases cost $200, $300 an hour. This could go on for months, years. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. "So we'll sell the house," Ashley said. "We'll use the equity. We'll do whatever it takes." I looked at her. My beautiful, loyal girlfriend who made documentaries about salmon runs and left love notes in my car. She was ready to burn our entire life down to save me. "I love you," I said. "I love you too," she said. "We're going to get through this." But I could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that was eating me alive. The next morning, everything got worse. I woke up to a phone call from Richard's lawyer. Richard had taken a plea deal. He was going to testify against me. In exchange for his cooperation, the federal government was willing to recommend a lighter sentence. He was going to tell them that I had helped him set up the shell companies, that I had signed off on fraudulent transfers, that I had benefited from the stolen money. None of it was true, but Richard's word against mine, with $2.3 million in missing funds and my signature on fraudulent documents, didn't sound like a fair fight. "He's lying," I told the lawyer. Her name was Patricia Dunlap, and she came recommended by Gerald Chen as someone who actually gave a damn. She was 60-something, with silver hair and a no-nonsense way of speaking that I appreciated. "I didn't do any of this." "I believe you," she said. We were in her office in downtown Portland, all glass and modern furniture that probably cost more than my car. But Richard has already met with the prosecutors. He's given them a detailed statement. He's going to be a very credible witness. He has no reason to lie, from the government's perspective, because he's already made his deal. I have plenty of reasons. I'm innocent. My reasons are that I don't want to go to prison for something I didn't do. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Here's what I think happened, she said. Richard needed money. Maybe he was in debt. Maybe he had a gambling problem. Maybe his ex-wife's alimony payments were killing him. I don't know yet. But he came up with this scheme to move funds from the development account into shell companies. And he needed a fall guy, someone who had access to the accounts, someone he could blame, someone who was junior enough to him that it would look plausible. Why me? Mike could have. Maybe Mike was suspicious. Maybe you were just convenient. The point is, Richard is going to sell you out to save himself, and unless we can prove that he accessed these accounts without your knowledge, the prosecutors are going to believe him. Can't we prove it? Can't we look at the computer logs, the IP addresses, something like that? We can try, Patricia said, but you're going to need to be prepared for the possibility that this doesn't work out the way you want it to. You mean I'm going to prison? I mean, we need to prepare for all possibilities. That includes negotiating a plea deal of your own, if it comes to that. I felt something crack inside my chest. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do. Then we're going to trial, Patricia said, and we're going to need a lot of money and a lot of time, and we're going to need to hope that we can convince a jury that you're innocent despite the circumstantial evidence against you. I left her office and sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. I couldn't breathe right. My chest felt tight. I thought about calling Ashley, but what would I say? That our life savings wasn't going to be enough? That I might go to prison anyway, even if we spent every penny we had? The next 3 weeks were a blur of depositions and document reviews. Patricia had a team of investigators looking into Richard's financial history, trying to find evidence of his motive. They found it. A second mortgage he'd taken out on his house, several maxed-out credit cards, some very expensive trips to Las Vegas. Richard had a gambling problem, a serious one. But knowing his motive didn't prove I was innocent. What it did was give Ashley an idea. She came to me on a Friday night, 3 weeks after the FBI showed up at my office. We were in the kitchen. She'd made pasta, our comfort food, but neither of us was eating. She had her laptop open, and there was a fire in her eyes that I hadn't seen in weeks. I've been thinking about this like a story, she said, like a narrative, and every story has evidence. There's a trail. There's a way to prove what happened. Patricia is working on that. Patricia is a lawyer. She's looking at financial documents, but I'm a filmmaker. I'm trained to find truth through different methods. What if Richard wasn't as careful as he thought? What if there's video evidence somewhere? Video evidence of what? Of him accessing the accounts, of him meeting with people involved in the shell companies, of him doing something that proves you had nothing to do with this. I stared at her. You want to investigate my own case? I want to help you, she said, and I think I might be able to see something that a financial investigator would miss. Will Patricia let us try? I called Patricia the next morning. She was skeptical, but not hostile. I'll let her have access to the documents we have, she said, but I can't pay her and I can't have her going off on some wild goose chase that interferes with our actual defense strategy. She won't, I said. She did, sort of. For 2 weeks, Ashley disappeared into a rabbit hole of financial records, security footage from Halstead Properties, and old emails that the FBI had seized. She set up a wall in our spare room, covered in printed documents, photographs, and notes connected with string, like she was working on a conspiracy theory. I thought she was wasting her time. Then she found something. "Brandon, come look at this," she called to me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the living room, staring at nothing, trying not to think about the fact that my preliminary hearing was scheduled for 4 weeks from now. She showed me the security footage from Halstead Properties. It was from March of this year, 6 months before the FBI showed up. It showed Richard in the office after hours, at his computer, making transfers, alone. And then, this was the important part, It showed him meeting with a man I'd never seen before. They shook hands. Richard handed him a USB drive. "Who is that?" Ashley asked. I had no idea, but Patricia did. The man's name was Derek Sato. He was a professional money launderer who'd been under federal investigation for 3 years. He had ties to organized crime in the Pacific Northwest, and he was the person who had set up the shell companies and moved the money. Richard hadn't been working alone. He'd brought in a professional, and he'd done it without me. "This changes things," Patricia said when I brought her the footage and Ashley's notes. For the first time since I'd hired her, she smiled. "This is good. This is really good. If we can prove that Richard was working with Sato independently, that you had no knowledge of Sato or the shell companies, then the narrative changes. Richard isn't a desperate guy who dragged his junior partner into a scheme. He's a criminal who was trying to frame his junior partner to cover his own tracks. Can we use this in court? We can try, but the FBI is going to want to know how we got this footage. It wasn't in the evidence they provided to us. If we tell them you obtained it independently, they're going to ask questions, and those questions could lead places we don't want to go." "What do you mean?" Patricia looked at me for a long moment. "I mean that your girlfriend may have accessed materials that were part of an active FBI investigation without authorization. That could be a federal crime in itself. So before we do anything with this, I need to know exactly how she obtained this footage." I went home and asked Ashley. "I got it from Jennifer," she said. Jennifer was Richard's executive assistant. She'd worked for him for 12 years. Ashley had called her up and asked if she wanted to get coffee. They'd met at a cafe in Northeast Portland. Ashley had explained the situation, and Jennifer had made a decision. She'd given Ashley copies of the security footage from Halstead Properties, the same footage the FBI had seized, but Jennifer had made her own copies months earlier for a personal project. She'd been documenting office life for her own reasons. The footage was legally hers to share. It wasn't legally mine to possess, but it also wasn't illegal for Jennifer to give it to me. It was a gray area, a very gray area, but it was also our only real shot. Patricia said she could use it. She said it was risky, but it was worth the risk. She said we could argue that the footage was provided to us voluntarily by someone with access to it, and that we had a right to use it in my defense. The preliminary hearing was in 4 weeks. The trial, if it came to that, would be months away. We had time, but not much. And then, 3 days before the hearing, I got arrested. It was 3 in the morning. I was asleep next to Ashley when the pounding started on the door. Police. They had a warrant for my arrest on additional charges, money laundering, in addition to the fraud charges. Richard had expanded his accusations. He was now saying I'd helped him launder the money, that I was more involved than he'd initially told the prosecutors. It was a lie, but the damage was done. They put me in handcuffs in my own house, while Ashley screamed at them to stop, to let me call my lawyer, to tell them they were making a mistake. They didn't care. They read me my rights. They took me to the station. It was 3 a.m. when they put me in the interrogation room, the same room where I'd been 4 weeks earlier. And this time, they had Detective Morrison back, the woman from the initial investigation, and she looked angry. "Your friend Richard has been very helpful," she said. "He's given us a lot of details about your involvement in the money laundering operation. Your fingerprints are on some of the documents from the shell company accounts." "Of course they are," I said. "I handle documents from the development account, but I didn't know what was in those specific files. Richard handled everything else." "That's not what he says, and frankly, his story is more credible than yours at this point." I asked for my lawyer. Morrison left the room. I sat there for what felt like hours. They didn't come back. No one came back. I was left alone with my thoughts and the knowledge that my life was completely, utterly, irreversibly over. That's when Ashley showed up. She was at the station at 5 a.m. and she was angry. Not scared. Angry. She demanded to see me. They told her she couldn't, that I was in custody, that only my lawyer could visit me. She said she was my emergency contact and she wanted to know what was happening. And then she did something that I didn't find out about until later. She started recording. She pulled out her phone and she recorded everything. the officers telling her she couldn't see me, the desk sergeant refusing to give her information, her asking questions and them not answering. She recorded it all, and she posted it to social media. By the time Patricia showed up at 6 a.m., it had already been shared 300 times. Patricia was furious. You can't post police station videos online. You could be charged with obstruction. You could be charged with... I don't care, Ashley said. She was standing in the hallway outside the interrogation room, and I could hear her through the door. I don't care what I get charged with. People need to see what they're doing to him. People need to know that the police are lying about him. You're making this worse, Patricia said. How could it possibly be worse? Ashley asked. Then Patricia went into the interrogation room with me, and I heard her tell Detective Morrison that I wasn't answering any more questions without her present. Morrison looked annoyed, but she complied. We sat there for another 2 hours. No one talked. I was cold, hungry, and terrified. And then something happened that no one expected. Detective Morrison came back in with a file in her hand. She looked pale. She looked shocked. She said, "Mr. Hayes, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me truthfully." I nodded. She opened the file. Inside was a photograph of Derek Sato, the man from the security footage, the professional money launderer who had set up the shell companies. "Do you know this man?" Morrison asked. "No," I said. "I've never seen him before in my life." Morrison's hand shook. She looked at Patricia, then she looked back at me. "According to our records," she said slowly, "this man has never had any contact with you. No phone calls, no emails, no meetings, nothing. We've been going through Richard Halstead's communications, and there's documentation of him meeting with Sato on multiple occasions, but there's nothing linking you to Sato at all." My heart started to race. "We may have made a mistake," Morrison said. And those 5 words changed everything. She left the room. Patricia grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard I thought she might break my fingers. "They're going to drop the charges," she whispered. "They found evidence that clears you. They're going to drop the charges." But I knew it wasn't going to be that simple, because Richard had already gone to trial. Richard had already testified against me. And there were still the original fraud charges, the ones that had started this whole nightmare. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, as Detective Morrison was staring at that photograph of Derek Sato, I realized that Ashley hadn't just saved my life by investigating on her own. She'd also put herself in danger. Because if Richard was willing to frame me for a crime I didn't commit, what would he do to the woman who was helping to prove it? The charges against me were quietly dropped 2 weeks later, not because the evidence was irrefutable, not because Patricia made some brilliant legal argument, but because Richard Halstead, in a moment of panic during a recess in his own trial, decided to tell the truth. He'd been sitting in a holding cell, waiting to testify for the 3rd day in a row, when his lawyer came to him with news. The FBI had found Derek Sato. They'd tracked him to a warehouse in Seattle where he was running another money laundering operation. When they arrested him, Sato had a flash drive in his pocket. On that drive were files documenting everything. Every conversation with Richard, every transfer, every shell company. Sato had kept meticulous records. He was a businessman after all. And in those records, my name appeared exactly once. As a person, Richard had considered framing, but ultimately decided against. Derek Sato had thought I was too smart to fall for it. He told Richard that pinning the whole operation on me would draw too much federal attention, that if Richard wanted to survive this, he needed a better strategy. Richard had panicked and done it anyway. When Sato's lawyer showed Richard what was on that drive, Richard broke. He confessed to everything. He told the prosecutors that he'd acted alone, that he'd tried to blame me out of desperation, that I was completely innocent. He was hoping for leniency, hoping that cooperation and a full confession would buy him a shorter sentence. It might have worked, but first, he had to face me. The meeting happened 3 days before his sentencing, in a small conference room at the federal courthouse. Patricia had insisted on it. She wanted him to look at me. She wanted him to say it to my face. "I'm sorry," Richard said. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the 3 months since his arrest. His hair had gone completely gray. His hands shook as he sat across the table from me. Patricia was there. So was a court-appointed mediator. And so was Ashley, standing in the corner with her phone recording. She had every right to be there. This was public record now. "You're sorry," I said. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. I'd imagined what I'd say, how angry I'd be, how satisfied I'd feel watching him suffer. But now that it was happening, I just felt tired. "I needed money," Richard said. "I was in debt. My ex-wife was bleeding me dry with alimony. I gambled away most of my savings. I was desperate. And when Sato approached me about moving money through the development accounts, I thought if I could just get enough money moved before anyone noticed, I could pay off my debts and disappear." "So you stole from your own company," I said. "Yes." $2.3 million. "Yes." "And when they started investigating, you blamed me." Richard didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my life?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. "Do you understand the damage?" "I know what I've done," Richard said quietly, "and I'll spend the next 10 years in federal prison thinking about it. But I know that doesn't fix anything for you." "It doesn't," I agreed. There was silence. The mediator cleared her throat. "Mr. Halstead, do you want to say anything else?" Richard looked at me, really looked at me. "I was jealous of you," he said. "You were smarter than me. You were going to get partner before I was ready to let that happen. And when I got into trouble, instead of facing it like an adult, I tried to take you down with me. It was cowardly. It was evil. And I'm sorry." I stood up. "Your apology doesn't matter to me," I said. "What matters is that you're going to prison. What matters is that everyone knows what you did. What matters is that you're going to have plenty of time to think about how you destroyed your own life, and you tried to destroy mine in the process." I walked out of that room, and Ashley followed me. In the hallway, she grabbed my hand. "You were incredible," she whispered. "I don't feel incredible," I said. "I feel hollow." The sentencing hearing was the next week. Richard got 10 years. He'll be eligible for parole in 7. Derek Sato got 15, and he's not eligible for anything. The shell companies were dismantled. The stolen money was recovered. Well, most of it. Some of it had been lost in Sato's various investments, but the FBI recovered enough that Halstead Properties was able to repay the development account. And I got my life back, or at least I got a version of it back. The problem is that even when you're proven innocent, the stain doesn't completely wash off. Halstead Properties' reputation was destroyed. The Pearl District project was canceled. The investors pulled out. My position there was untenable, so I resigned before they could push me out. I had a job offer from another development firm within a week. Word travels fast in Portland. Everyone knew I'd been framed. Everyone wanted to hire the guy who'd been screwed over by his boss and came out of it looking like a hero. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who'd been through a war and couldn't quite remember what peace felt like. Ashley wanted to make a documentary about it. She had producers interested, streaming platforms calling. Her video from the police station had gone viral, 3 million views, and suddenly everyone wanted to hear the story of the woman who'd helped exonerate her innocent boyfriend by investigating the crime herself. She asked me if she could do it. "It's your story," I said. "Tell it however you want." She did. The documentary was called The File, and it premiered at SXSW to standing ovations. It was beautiful and brutal and honest. She interviewed me, Patricia, Jennifer from Halstead Properties, the FBI agents, the prosecutors, even Richard, speaking to her via video call from federal prison. But the best part, the part that made me actually cry when I watched it for the first time, was when she interviewed herself. Just her, sitting in our kitchen, talking about why she'd started investigating in the first place. "I think I knew, somewhere deep down, that the legal system was going to fail him," she said. "Not because the system is corrupt, but because it's slow, and it's mechanical, and it doesn't care about Brandon Hayes the person. It cares about Brandon Hayes, the defendant. So I decided that if no one else was going to tell his story, I would. The documentary won an award at SXSW. It got picked up by a streaming service. It played in film festivals across the country. And it changed everything. Not in the way I expected. I didn't become famous. I didn't become rich. But something shifted in how I saw the world and how the world saw me. I was no longer the guy who was almost ruined by his boss. I was the guy whose girlfriend had fought for him when the entire system seemed designed to crush him. We got married 6 months after Richard's sentencing. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. My mom cried the whole time. Mike gave a toast that was funny and touching in equal measure. Ashley looked like she was glowing. We sold the house in Riverside. We took some of the equity and invested it in Ashley's production company. She's doing bigger projects now, documentaries that are getting real distribution, real budgets. We moved to a smaller place in Northeast Portland, closer to her studio, closer to the city. I work for a development firm that specializes in sustainable housing. The money is slightly less, but the work feels meaningful in a way that commercial development never did. My boss, a woman named Karen who's been in the business for 20 years, told me during my first week that she'd watched my documentary 3 times. I wanted to make sure I knew who I was hiring, she said. I needed to know if you were the kind of person who'd bounce back from something like that, or if you'd be bitter about it forever. What did you decide? I asked. I decided you were the right person for the job, she said. Richard's appeal was denied. He'll serve his full sentence. Derek Sato is in a federal prison in California. I don't think about either of them much anymore. They're not part of my story anymore. They're a chapter that's been closed and filed away. What I do think about, late at night when I can't sleep, is how close I came to pleading guilty to something I didn't do. How close I came to spending years in prison for a crime orchestrated by someone I trusted. How close Ashley and I came to losing everything because one man decided he'd rather destroy an innocent person than face his own failures. And I think about how lucky I am that Ashley believed in me, not just believed, but acted, that she investigated when lawyers were telling her to stay out of it, that she recorded at the police station when everyone was telling her it was a bad idea, that she made a documentary that forced the truth out into the world. Last month, Jennifer from Halstead Properties called me. She got a job at another development firm, and she wanted to thank me for not blaming her for giving Ashley the security footage. I told her there was nothing to thank me for. She'd done the right thing, and it had cost her nothing but a phone call to an old friend. It cost me peace of mind, she said. I knew what Richard had done. I knew you were innocent, and I spent 3 months wondering if I was going to come forward or stay quiet. I'm just glad I made the right choice. So am I said. Ashley and I are talking about kids. We're still young enough that there's no rush, but we're thinking about it. We want a daughter, I think. We want to teach her to stand up for what's right, to investigate the truth, to believe in people who deserve to be believed in. We want to teach her the lesson that we learned the hard way, that sometimes the system fails, that sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands, that sometimes the person who saves you isn't a lawyer or a judge or a detective. Sometimes it's the person you love, armed with nothing but a camera and the absolute conviction that you deserve better. That's what got me through. That's what saved me, and I will never, ever take that for granted.